Hello, and welcome to another week of This Week in Cars. I'm your host, Jaron Wong, and my co-host,
Justin Hong.
This week is the week of the 11th, and we have quite a bit of news. So let's jump right in. For this week, the first news that I would say is probably the most exciting news, so to speak, is the Porsche Mission R concept. So to preface, this Mission R is an electric concept race car. And I think we've talked in previous episodes about how there's not too many electric car, race car, not too many manufacturers are getting into this sector. So it's quite exciting that Porsche is diving headfirst.
Yeah, and I feel like they really put in a good effort for this one. So this one, they have a chassis kind of based on the current Cayman, and they put in over 1,000 horsepower of electric motors into this. So
yeah,
it's pretty fast, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's quite reminiscent of the race cars from I want to say from Le Mans specifically. I want to say it's the 944 or the
Yeah, it definitely looks like one of those Le Mans prototypes. But they've definitely kind of tweaked the styling a bit.
Yeah, I mean, so the peak horsepower is at 1,073 for qualifying. But I think in the race mode, it's only limited to 371 horsepower, which is still crazy amounts of horsepower for a race car, especially a electric one specifically.
Yeah. So I think this is one of the first major efforts to build an electric race car. And it seems that it should drive pretty well. They've kind of kept the weight under control. I believe it's less than 3,000 pounds. A little bit over actually.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, but it's pretty good considering how many batteries you have to fit into it.
Yeah, so I've been questioning. So you follow Formula One as well, right?
Yeah.
So in the case of electric electric racing, we have Formula One and Formula E, and not to mention the GT series, or World Endurance Championship. So right now, Formula One has been, it's been going on since the 40s. This is the 70th or 70-something year Formula One has been going on.
Yeah.
Formula E has only started maybe a few years ago, 4 to 5 years ago.
Yeah, around 5 years ago.
So the question is in the case of electric racing, I know Formula One's trying to switch to synthetic fuels, right? But I feel like there's an eventuality where Formula One and Formula E essentially converge,
So do you think Formula E will become more like Formula One today, and then they'll be so close that there's no need to kind of have that distinction?
Yeah, I think that FIA is going to eventually merge the two.
Yeah, it makes sense. 'Cause even today, Formula One is hybridized, right? We get 160 horsepower out of that. MGU H and MGU K. So it feels like they're definitely heading towards that direction. And even though Formula One still uses ICE engines, they're trying to improve the efficiency of that. So it feels like FIA is really making an effort towards making Formula One more environmentally friendly. And so it makes sense that they'll try to transition to all-electric race cars when the technology is there.
Yeah, but then that raises a question for me. I know they're both FIA sanctioned, but I want to say that Formula E is run by a different race promoter. The question is essentially what becomes of those who have for instance, Formula One. There was a recent video where Sebastian Vettel was able to list every single winner of Formula One races in the past, right? Or rather, every single world championship. So, what happens when they converge to a point where Formula One is equivalent or is the same as Formula E? Would people have to remember both champions, or would it just be we forget whoever had won Formula E before the convergence, so to speak.
I think that really depends on how that convergence happens and how FIA manages it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but back to the Porsche
back to the
electric
Mission
car.
R.
I think so. Electric racing, for the most part, like, you know, it's quite different because there's no gears to go through, right? I think it makes it quite similar to karting, because like until you reach the like higher end of karting or where karts have like gears, there's no gears, you know, like you're just like one single speed. It's just like one gear go. So it kind of brings it back to that, and I think that makes it easier to drive, as well as like you're probably likely to see even faster lap times with a electric car for sure.
Yeah, but I think it has like an impact on the driving experience. So without having to like shift through gears, and also you don't have the sound of the engine with the electric powertrain, obviously. So. And from what we've heard, the Mission R doesn't sound great on a racetrack.
Right.
Yeah, it's loud, but not loud in a good way. Like you just hear the gear train and not so much else.
I think the other question is like, obviously we've seen from Formula E that like people are not as attracted to it because there's not the visceral experience of noise and, you know, the roar of the engines or anything, right? It's just like an electric whine, and people say that it's very it makes it feel like less of an experience compared to Formula One.
Yeah, and you hear the same complaints about Formula One today versus the Formula One of the past.
The V10 era.
The V10 era, like the V12 and even the V8s. Like after we switched to hybrid V6 engines, there's just everyone's just complaining about how they sound like crap compared to the V8s and the V10s.
But I would say I feel like this would still provide faster lap times. And, you know, in the world of motorsports, you don't care about, you know, noise or like it's like a bonus. But in the case of racing, you're about chasing the last second, whatever gets you fastest around the track, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, like.
But the thing with like racing is that the racing like transmissions, they're so fast today. Like in Formula One, the gear shifts are pretty much instantaneous, right? So there's really not that much benefit from the electric motor, except for, I guess if you have like motors on all four wheels, you have torque vectoring and all of that. But just from having like a single speed transmission, you're not going to have as much of a lap time benefit compared to road cars where all the transmissions are slower.
Because I feel like, at least from like when I've played like simulation rigs, you know, what gear you're in is super important to getting around a corner. And then like if you're in the wrong gear, you know, you don't have enough torque. But in the case of an electric car, you can take a corner at the same, it's literally the same gear.
Yeah, it's probably easier, like easier learning curve, right? Because you don't have to worry about what gear you're in.
Yeah,
but
and I think it's
when you get to like the pinnacle of motor racing where everyone knows which gear they'll be in.
Yeah, that's true.
Where you'll start seeing that the lap times probably won't be too much different. And you also have the additional weight for the batteries, which probably have some impact as well. Right.
I think like batteries is the it's a limiting factor for motorsports, but I think it's something that you can engineer away to a certain extent. So for one, you can change the race rules, so it's like you can swap batteries, or there's a lot of different like ways that race rules can change, or rather like accommodate electric cars. But there's also like from the chemistry side, so to speak, like you can do more weight reduction, or you can do I'm blanking right now, but
yeah, it seems like there's an easier, like for batteries, it's pretty easy, like, well, at least it's simple which direction you want to go. You just make the batteries like lighter, and that gives you all the benefits. Whereas with internal combustion engines, it kind of feels like we're at the point where it becomes really hard to get any significant improvement, just because everything is like kind of developed to as good as it can be with today's technology.
Yeah, I think the final question for this is like whether or not we'll see a street car that's based off the Mission R.
I think the technology that the Mission R has, it'll start trickling down to Porsche's road cars, definitely.
We already know that the next Cayman is going to be full electric, I believe.
So it's safe to say that the Cayman will have some of the technologies that Porsche has introduced in the Mission R.
Cool. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Mission R?
No. Let's jump to the next car review.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
So for our next car news for this week, we got the Mazda MX-30, which is going to have a rotary range extender. So that's essentially a rotary engine dedicated to simply extending the range, I believe.
Yeah. So the MX-30 is like Mazda's new EV, but it has pretty bad range compared to other EVs today.
I think that's an understatement. We were seeing like ranges of like 90 miles or something.
Yeah, I think the EPA is barely above 100. So it makes perfect sense why they're trying to introduce a range extender to this car. But what's interesting is that they're using a Wanko engine.
Right.
So
the Dorito engine.
Yeah. So I think Mazda fans have been waiting a long time for Mazda to bring back their Wanko engine that they used in the RX-7, RX-8. But this is probably not how they expected Mazda to bring it back.
No, I mean, how many years have we been hearing rumors of an RX-9? I think ever since the RX-8's like untimely demise in 2011, 2012, like we kept hearing every year, like, oh, we're gonna see an RX-9. There's an RX-9 concept. We got to see the. I know Mazda had that concept that was like the one that burned down on Top Gear, if you remember. The Mazda Nagare. Or Ferrari.
Was that also rotary engine powered?
I don't know if it was rotary, but I want to say like it was like a concept that people were looking forward to a lot. It's kind of like the Vision GT kind of deal, but yeah, we never really got the Dorito engine that we wanted after the RX-8, and this is the unfortunate way they bring it back.
Yeah, so I think the reason that Mazda kind of discontinued the rotary engine after RX-8 was because of like emissions and fuel economy and kind of reliability as well.
Yeah, I think reliability is a huge factor.
So in the RX-7, RX-8, that engine needed to be rebuilt a lot.
Every like 100,000 miles.
Yeah,
right?
Because of the apex seals, I think. So there's some engineering challenges with that. And also the fuel economy was not great as well. Compared to how much power it produced. Yeah,
but the rotary engine was able to rev to like 9,000 RPM, I want to say. Like that's one of the reasons why people really wanted it, because it had that high revving characteristic that like the Japanese cars were known for.
Yeah.
Right.
I think rotary engines in general, they really like to be revved out. And if you drive like the RX-8 slowly all the time, then you have a bunch of problems that come up.
Right.
So I think in this MX-30, what they're trying to do is to have the rotary engine just running at its peak, like efficiency and reliability point, where you can avoid a lot of the issues with the rotary engine that kind of plagued the RX-8, just by keeping it running hard, like when it runs.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
So with this range extender, how much range are we expecting to see?
I mean, once you have like a range extender engine, it kind of just depends on how big of a fuel tank you have, right?
That's true, yeah.
So this is kind of similar to what BMW had with the i3. So they had a range extender as well. But the range extender is not very refined in that car. It was kind of just like a last resort. Like when it's running, it's super loud, it vibrates.
Same with the i8.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the reasons why the i8, even though it had the very futuristic design, it didn't have that kind of drivetrain to match that. And I actually have a friend who has an i8, and he could drive that thing. But the thing is, that car is really built more as a Grand Tour. It's not like a race car, even though it has the looks of a race car. So
yeah.
The thing is, plug-in hybrids plug-in hybrids, PHEVs are just transitional products, right? And right now we're going to see a Wankel engine, which we haven't seen in many years, and it's probably going to be the last instance of it.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a good thing that Mazda is putting this Wankel engine into its best use case today.
Sure.
Yeah, it's really taking advantage of how smooth it is, how much it can rev. But I don't think they're gonna come back with another car that's just like the RX-8.
A pure Wankel engine.
Pure.
There's not gonna be an RX-9.
It's not gonna happen.
At least that's as far as we know. I'd be willing to put money that we're not gonna see it.
Yeah,
but the auto industry never ceases to surprise. I mean, maybe some bean counter will be like, hey, let's do it.
I feel like it's the regulation that's a problem.
Well, you can always out-engineer the regulations, right? You can put on a huge catalytic converter.
If Mazda had like unlimited engineering funds, it can make it happen. But let's be real here.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah. On to our next news. More on electric race cars. We have the Hyundai RM20e, which is the latest effort in the Hyundai N division to do electric cars. So this one is quite exciting. It's quite reminiscent of the i20N, which was Hyundai's hot hatch race car. And in this specific instance, we're going to see 799 horsepower on this hot hatch race car.
Yeah, that's a lot.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this one is kind of built on the Veloster body. And they've kind of just stuffed in their electric powertrain into that. So in this case, the RM stands for like rear midship, I believe. So I think that kind of gives these prototypes like really good handling because of the centralized weight distribution.
I think what's also interesting about this one is that it's co-developed with Rimac, which is the car that Richard Hammond managed to crash on the Grand Tour. And the Rimac CEO recently was named the CEO of Bugatti as well.
Yeah.
So this is essentially a Bugatti race car.
Yeah, 2 degrees of connection, but sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that this race car is going to benefit from the resources that Rimac can provide, and I think I'm quite excited to see this in like touring car racing for in the near future.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this RM20e is that they actually have like an artificial sound system for this, where it creates artificial sound while it's driving. And I think what they're trying to go for is they try to create like a V8 sound when it's accelerating. Which I'm not sure if that's the right way to go, because like as we're transitioning to electric racing, I don't know if it's a good idea to play like a V8 sound. It's probably better to create something more unique to electric cars to kind of differentiate them from...
You want to hire sound engineers to make coil whine that sounds pleasing over
not
V8
necessarily coil whine, but something that's unique, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Like with the V8 sound, it feels like they're just trying to pretend that this is a gas race car.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the kind of like as we talked about like Formula One or Formula E, people crave that kind of noise factor for the experience. It's not. I mean, artificial sound is not like it's pretty commonplace in most performance cars now, right?
Yeah, nowadays definitely.
The difference for this one being like an electric car is playing the noise of a gas car.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that they're making an attempt, I guess. But yeah, I don't see the use for it.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that this artificial sound is here to stay, whether in race cars or street cars. But it'll be interesting to see, like with electric cars being so quiet, you can pretty much put whatever soundtrack you want.
Sure.
And I'm interested in seeing how like sound engineers.
I want them to play the Monty Python, the coconuts with the horses. Just have the car with the coconuts going. I think that would be the sound I would want to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then our next news is the Chrysler Airflow concept. So this is, I would say, big news for Stellantis. This is their attempt at a Mustang Mach-E rival. So we're going to see up to 440 miles of range for this Stellantis vehicle, and it's the same soupy crossover shape that we've seen from many manufacturers. But is there anything that you see special in this Airflow EV?
So I think 440 miles of range is quite a big number to hit, right? So that's probably, I think that's higher than the Model S, like long range.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really high goal that they've set for themselves. But this Chrysler Airflow is also arriving in 2024. So that gives them plenty of time to engineer this for sure.
Yeah, we've seen like I think out of the Lucid Air, there's like a 520 miles of range, which is obviously that's the top of the line model, and that car is like 130 grand.
Yeah.
So we know that kind of range is doable. The difference between that one and the Airflow EV is that it's a crossover. This one is probably going to be mid-market, so to speak. I would probably estimate maybe 50K for this. Do you think people would pay 50K for this car?
I think the top of the line one would probably be around 50K for that projected 440 miles of range. And that seems reasonable. I'm not sure if it's doable. I think it kind of depends on what Stellantis Chrysler does in the next few years and how much investment they'll put into scaling up battery production.
Yeah,
That's probably the way to go.
We've seen Dodge, which is a subsidiary of Stellantis, to be going towards the e-muscle, e-muscle demographic, whatever that means. It's all marketing speak. But we know, so from that, we know that Stellantis is making a serious effort towards electric cars. And we talked about it previously when the Dodge announced that they're getting rid of the Hellcat engine, or discontinuing it, so to speak. Obviously, this is the way the industry's going. I feel like we should probably have a drinking game where we say the phrase, "This is the way the industry is going," but this is the way the industry is going.
Yeah, so I think the Airflow name is, I like it better than Mustang Mach-E.
Yeah, I want to say that the Airflow came from Chrysler's, like, in the 60s or 70s, they had a car that was called the Airflow. So this is like them bringing back that name. But
yeah, wasn't there that trend towards aerodynamic everything back then where like even your toaster had to look aerodynamic?
Yeah, I think there's a specific phrase for it, like
streamline,
I think so.
Yeah, I think that was the phrase. I remember studying something like that. Like there was that time where everything had to look streamlined and aerodynamic, whether it was moving or not. The
Airflow name actually comes from the mid 30s, which is post Great Depression, that's literally 90 years ago at this point. So it's kind of cool that Chrysler's talking about their heritage, but at this point we all know that Chrysler's a Italian company now. Yeah. From the photos we see, there's going to be a big screen.
Of course.
Yeah, as usual. I would say that like Chrysler's infotainment has been quite good. The Uconnect. So I wouldn't expect too many drastic changes. It looks like we're going to go to a digital tach, as well as the entire dashboard is going to be a screen. So
yeah.
is there anything that would differentiate the Stellantis or the Airflow from current EV offerings?
I think since it's kind of set to come out as the 2025 model, there's a lot of like with the range, it's set to be higher than what EV offerings have today.
Sure.
But I also think that a lot of things will change from now to then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is still a concept.
I would say if you squint really hard, the rear kind of looks like a Mach-E. So, I mean, it's one thing to target a rival. It's another thing to just straight up copy them. And I guess that's one way to, I would say the Mach-E, like, I've heard good things and bad things about it. You know, I would say that the good thing is that the adoption is pretty good. For despite how many people said it would never do well because it was ruining the Mustang nameplate, people are buying it anyways.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few actually.
Yeah, same. So, I mean, the Airflow is, you know, it's not a sports car. It's not like Chrysler took the Challenger nameplate and named it the Challenger EV.
The E-Muscle.
E-Muscle, yeah. So, I mean, it's a very safe play. I don't think there's anything too out of the box for this one. Yeah. Besides the range is going to be good, and that's what most people care about anyway. Yeah. So, yeah. I think we can move on to what is the biggest abomination of this week. We're going to see a Toyota Corolla Cross. And this thing is basically a shrunken down RAV4.
Or a bloated Corolla.
A bloated Corolla. A Corolla that got bit by a rattlesnake or something and then suddenly started, you know, like swelling.
Yeah. So this will kind of be like a crossover that's smaller than the RAV4, but larger than the CHR.
Right.
So the CHR, I think it's been kind of controversial with the styling.
Yeah.
So I think for the CHR, Toyota kind of definitely targeted the younger demographic with the out of their styling. But I think one of the complaints with the CHR was that it didn't have the performance to back up its looks.
Yeah. I think that's very standard of most, if not all, Toyota products.
Yeah.
So not only just Toyota, even pushing it up to the Lexus lineup. You know, we're just seeing cars that look cool, look aggressive, are not aggressive. You know?
Yeah. So this Corolla Cross, they're kind of going back to their roots where it looks bland, it drives bland, but you know it'll move you.
Right. It gets you from A to B. You know, I think it also kind of reminds me of the Toyota Matrix. Which was like a hatchback. That one I would say it was quite a popular car.
Yeah.
And I thought the styling on that for like 2005 or whenever it came out, like that era was actually quite not futuristic, but like, you know, modern. This one, they could have called it the new Matrix. But it would be a shame to that nameplate because it is not as cool as the Matrix was.
Yeah, so I think for this one they're trying to capture that market where you have people that want a crossover that's smaller than the RAV4, kind of like what Honda has with the HR-V.
Yeah, besides the HR-V, there's not. I wouldn't say there's too much competition in this market. Well. I guess there's also the CX-30, which
and Hyundai Kona.
And they all try to go for this smaller crossover that has like plastic cladding that makes it look like it has off-road chops. But like everyone knows, no one's gonna take these off-road. They're probably gonna go down a dirt path at most, right?
Probably even not that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. A lot of this design has been fueled by the pandemic, in that people, like car companies, realize, hey, people like the outdoors because of the pandemic, right? A lot of people, you know, like to go to parks now, and they go cycling or like mountain biking and stuff, and they want a car to match that aesthetic. But as you know, I predict that we're going to come out of this pandemic, and then these cars are going to drop significantly in demand. because people are going to go back to their normal lives of commuting and then forget that they even mountain biked in the pandemic. You know?
mean, the Corolla Cross, I don't think it's that targeted towards that active lifestyle, right?
Really? I would say that because of all the plastic cladding, it looks super like
I feel like plastic
rugged
cladding is kind of standard nowadays. Like
as a way to as a cost cutting measure.
Yeah, and like you have the RAV4 Adventure trim, which kind of goes even further with that active lifestyle. And
yeah, but the Adventure
Forester,
trim is like
wilderness.
$35K.
Yeah.
This one is gonna come in as cheap as $23K.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I argue that people who can't shell out that extra like $12K is gonna go for this one instead. Yeah. But still get like maybe 70-80% of that aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's move on so we don't have to keep looking at that abomination.
I think it'll sell well.
It will, unfortunately. As much as we
may not like it, but you know, there's definitely a market.
And if it this is the same as Mazda, if it sells well, as long as they put that money towards developing the Supra or something, I'll take it. You know? On to our final piece of news for this week. We have the Bmw i3, but it's not a bubble. This is going to be the smaller version of the i4. So just like the i4 is a normal sedan, we're going to see a i3 that's going to be a straight competitor with the Tesla Model 3.
Yeah, so it's basically an electric 3 Series.
Right.
But they decided to reuse that i3 badge.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'm glad they got rid of the bubble. Like, that thing was so ugly, you know?
Yeah.
So this is definitely a move towards the better. The question is, I mean, like, I don't know how many people still remember the i3 as a bubble. I think if you ask maybe 90% of car enthusiasts, they'll be like, oh, the bubble. But, you know, I'm glad that BMW is normalizing, or rather rebadging the i3 to be a normal car.
Yeah, so I think there's been like no question that BMW is going to make an electric 3 Series. It's just a matter of when. But I'm still not sure why they decided to use the i3 nameplate.
I think when they released the i4, they realized, oh, we can just, you know, make the electric version of the 3 Series and call it the i3. And
hopefully everyone will forget about the old i3.
the bubble. The balloon car.
Yeah.
I remember, like, actually I didn't really want the i3, but like it was a cool car in that when it just came out. You know, it was a car that had a full carbon tub. And you can't say that about too many cars, you know.
Yeah. It was uniquely ugly.
True. There was also a few videos where it like smoked like a Porsche, if you remember. I want to say like the 0 to 60 on the i3 was like 4 seconds, if not faster. I mean, you know, typical electric cars, but like after like 80, 90 miles an hour, it ran out of steam.
Yeah, I feel like probably the limitation was the super skinny tires.
That too.
Which were custom to the i3 and kind of look ridiculous.
Yeah, it kind of made it look like a golf cart that was covered. Yeah, I mean, there's not too much more to talk about for the i3, short of that it's, you know, an electric 3 Series. Yeah, we don't have too much info about the range or anything, but one thing we do know is that it's very likely that's going to be a Chinese-only car.
At least initially, but I think it would just be a matter of time before they bring it worldwide. Right.
Cool. I think that closes out our news for this week. Let's move on to our Grind My Gears section. So I think this was your Grind My Gears, so you want to introduce it?
So this week for Grind My Gears is Aftermarket LED Headlights.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with Aftermarket LED Headlights, they're basically the LED bulbs you buy from Amazon or eBay, and you just put it into your factory halogen enclosure.
For a second, I thought you were going to say they're literally Satan.
I mean, that's also true. But, you know, like, they advertise those as being brighter and whiter and better and all of that. But what ends up happening is
I don't think you can say whiter and better in the same version, in the same sentence. It's not PC anymore, man.
But what ends up happening is that you kind of blind everyone on the road. Yeah.
That's
so
for sure.
like the light reflector was kind of built for the original like halogen bulb with the filament, and it reflects that properly towards the road in front of you. But then with the aftermarket LED headlights, they kind of put LEDs like everywhere in the whole bulb, right?
Right.
So the reflector throws light everywhere, like, and what ends up happening is that your road isn't even that bright because you're shining light like at the
Straight
sky.
at the straight in front of the person, or straight into the person in front of you.
Yeah, like everywhere.
Right.
And if you're driving oncoming with someone with one of these bulbs, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a few times I've been driving down a dark road, and then like there's someone who has LEDs across from me, and then I would, flash my high beams at them, and then they show me their high beams, and I'm like, oh no, I'm literally staring straight into the sun.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of a PSA, honestly, right? Don't buy aftermarket LED bulbs.
For one, yeah.
Yeah, just don't do it.
I think the other annoying thing is people with lifted trucks. If you get a lifted truck and then you also use aftermarket LED bulbs,
it's game over
it's
for everyone on the road.
Yeah, you're literally blinding the entire 4-lane highway by driving down. Like that, I think that's also it could be an entirely different Grind My Gear section about lifted trucks.
Yeah.
But they have that kind of mentality, like, I don't care. Screw you. I'm the king of the road because I have a lifted truck with aftermarket LED headlights, right?
Yeah, but the thing is with these like LED headlights, if you're driving some residential street and you're blinding someone oncoming, you're increasing the chances that they're going to crash into you.
Significantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like it reduces the safety for everyone else and yourself. Yeah.
So I think the moral of the story is, 1, don't be an asshole and buy those LED headlights. 2, have a little compassion for your fellow road goers.
Yeah.
It's safe. It's best for you and me. Right?
Exactly. Share the road.
Share the road. Even though we hate, I don't like bicyclists. Well, that's just me. Share the road, but bicyclists.
That could be another Grind My Gear section.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I think that's a wrap. Anything exciting coming in the next few weeks?
So I think there's going to be a Lotus Type 132 electric SUV. So this one Lotus released like a teaser video about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen a few other sports car manufacturers go for the SUV. We already have the Urus, and then the Ferrari has the Purosangue, which I fortunately have not seen that monstrosity on the road yet. But Lotus is just one of the many sports car manufacturers thinking, hey, we can do an SUV too, just by slapping a badge on it and ruining the heritage. But yeah, I can't wait to see that disaster. On that terrible note, thanks for listening. Please check out our social media, which we have at This Week in Cars on Instagram, as well as our website, thisweekincars.com, and our YouTube channel, This Week in Cars. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Yep, until next time.
Until next time.